Welcome to Soul Stories, where every tale touches the heart, inspires the mind, and stays with the soul. Maya Reyes, an 18-year-old aviation student with a head full of dreams and a heart set on the skies, settled into her seat on Flight 792 with a blend of excitement and nervous energy. This was her first trip overseas, her first time crossing an ocean, her first time on a wide-body jet, and her first time feeling like she was truly stepping into the world she had admired since childhood. Ever since she was little. She had spent afternoons lying on the rooftop of her house, watching aircraft carve silver trails across the sky. She would whisper their airline names under her breath, imagining who was sitting behind those tiny windows and what adventures they were heading toward. Now she was one of those travelers. The cabin hummed with the soft chatter of passengers, settling in, families comparing boarding passes, business travelers typing quickly on tablets, and children pressing their faces against the windows in delight. The overhead bins thumped shut as flight attendants glided down the aisles with practiced grace, offering warm smiles and helping hands. Maya buckled her seatbelt, ran her fingers over the stitched airline logo on the headrest, and glanced out the window. The massive wings stretched outward like a giant white feather. For a moment, she felt small, but in the best way possible, like she was part of something bigger than herself. The engines whirred to life, a deep vibrating growl that every aviation lover recognizes as a promise, we're going somewhere. Maya felt the familiar thrill rise in her chest as the plane taxied toward the runway. Ladies and gentlemen, Flight 792 is cleared for takeoff. The captain's calm voice announced through the speakers. The acceleration pinned her gently to her seat. The runway blurred, the city lights streaked by, and with a smooth, powerful lift, the jet climbed into the sky. Maya smiled instinctively. Takeoff was her favorite part. That moment when steel defies gravity always felt magical to her. Passengers relaxed, some pulling out books, others closing their eyes as the aircraft reached cruising altitude. Soft music played in the background. Flight attendants began preparing for the meal service. Everything felt normal, safe, predictable, until a sudden chime sounded from the speakers. It wasn't the usual soft ding that announced seatbelt signs or meal service. It was sharper, more urgent. Conversations around Maya faded as people looked up. A flight attendant picked up the intercom, her voice steady but carrying an unmistakable tension. If there is a doctor on board, she said, pausing only for a breath. Please come to the cockpit immediately. The cabin fell silent. Eyes widened, and Maya felt the first cold flicker of unease crawl down her spine, though she couldn't yet imagine how drastically her life was about to change.
Approaching cruising altitude. All systems nominal.
Minutes after the tense announcement, a strange shudder rippled through the aircraft. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to make passengers grip their armrests and glance nervously at one another. The lights flickered for a split second, and the steady hum of conversation died instantly. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Something was wrong. A flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her face pale. Her steps rushed but controlled an attempt at calm that fooled no one. Two more cabin crew members darted toward the cockpit, one carrying a medical kit, another whispering frantically into a handheld radio. Maya leaned slightly into the aisle, trying to catch a glimpse, but all she saw were worried eyes and nervous motion. Then the murmurs began, soft at first, threads of fear weaving from row to row. Did you hear both pilots? They collapsed. How can that even happen? What are we going to do? The words floated around her like icy drafts. Maya felt her heart hammering as dread wrapped around the cabin. She unbuckled slightly, craning her neck as the flight attendants returned from the cockpit. Their faces confirmed it. Something devastating had happened behind that locked door. Finally, one of them approached the center aisle, gripping the intercom with trembling fingers. She swallowed hard before speaking, her voice thin and shaking. Despite her effort to stay composed, ladies and gentlemen, she began, we need immediate assistance. If there is anyone on board with flight experience, please come forward. The effect was instant. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Passengers looked at one another helplessly. A few people stood halfway, only to sit back down when they realized they had nothing useful to offer. Parents held their children closer. Some stared at the floor, others at the ceiling, as if an answer might appear there. Maya felt sweat prick the back of her neck. She could hear her pulse pounding in her ears. Her training years of simulator practice, hours spent memorizing cockpit layouts, emergency procedures, radio communication flashed through her mind like scattered puzzle pieces. She looked at her hands, they were shaking. I'm just a student, she thought. I've never flown a real plane. What if I make things worse? But then she looked around. 300 people, scared, vulnerable, hoping anyone would save them. And there was still no hand raised, except one. Maya inhaled sharply, gathering every ounce of courage she had. She slowly lifted her trembling hand high enough for the flight attendant to see. I've trained on simulators, she said, her voice weak but steadying with each word. I can try. The flight attendant's eyes widened, shock mixing with desperate hope. Without hesitation, she motioned Maya toward the front. Maya stood, legs unsteady, heart pounding like a war drum, and began walking toward the cockpit toward the impossible. The cockpit smelled faintly of burnt circuitry and cold metal. Maya stepped inside, her breath catching as she saw both pilots slumped in their seats, flight attendants working desperately beside them. For a moment, the sight almost broke her courage, but she forced her gaze to the controls she'd only ever seen in textbooks and simulators. The flight attendant gently guided her forward. Sit, she whispered, as if afraid her voice might shatter the fragile hope in the room. Maya slid into the captain's seat, the place she had dreamed of, yet never imagined occupying like this. Alarms blinked angrily across the panels, warning of turbulence, autopilot disengagement, and fluctuating altitude. The plane wobbled again, and Maya gripped the yoke tightly to steady herself. A crackling voice broke through the cockpit speakers. This is air traffic control. We've been informed of your situation. Who is flying the aircraft? Maya swallowed hard before pressing the radio button. Hello. This is Maya Reyes. I'm an aviation student. I've trained on simulators, and I'll try my best. A brief silence. Then a calm, steady voice replied. Maya, listen to me. We're going to do this together. You're not alone. The reassurance washed over her like a lifeline. She straightened in the seat. Outside. Lightning cracked across the sky. Thick storm clouds churned beneath them, and rain streaked the windows like silver lines. The aircraft shuddered violently, making warning lights flash even brighter. Maya, disengage the autopilot completely, the controller instructed. Her fingers trembled, but she pressed the switch. The aircraft dipped sharply. Gasps erupted from the cabin behind her. Maya tightened her grip and pulled back gently on the yoke, leveling the plane. Good. Now reduce your speed. No sudden movements. Every second felt like an hour. Her arm strained as she fought the wind pushing against the jet. Sweat trickled down her forehead. Her breathing became shallow, but she forced herself to remember her training. Simulators. Emergency protocols. Landing approaches. Trust yourself. Through the storm. A faint glow appeared at the airport's guiding lights breaking through the darkness like scattered stars. Maya. The runway is ahead. Begin your descent. Her stomach dropped as she nudged the nose downward. The plane trembled harder, winds buffeting them from all sides. Somewhere in the cabin, someone began to pray aloud. Maya tuned everything out, every sound, every fear, and focused only on the runway growing larger. In front of her, the guidance systems beeped, the altitude decreasing rapidly. Easy, the controller urged. The ground surged up to meet them. Thud, the wheels slammed into the runway, bouncing once, twice, but then the aircraft stabilized, rolling forward, slowing, aligned perfectly down the center line. The jet screeched to a halt. For a moment, silence. Then, from the cabin behind her, a roar of relief and disbelief exploded. Cries, laughter, applause, all blending into one overwhelming sound. Maya exhaled shakily. She had done it. When the aircraft finally came to a complete stop, there was a single suspended moment of silence, just the gentle hum of the engines winding down and the soft thrum of the tires cooling against the runway. It was a pause that felt heavier than anything Maya had ever experienced, a fragile breath between terror and relief. Then, as if the world exhaled together, the cabin erupted into cheers, laughter, and tears. Passengers clambered to their feet, some clapping, some shouting a name, though they barely knew it. Strangers embraced one another, some gripping hands, others weeping into the shoulders of those nearby. In the middle of the chaos, Maya could only sit frozen for a moment, her heart still racing, her fingers shaking as they rested on the now-still controls. The flight attendants rushed in, tears in their eyes, hugging her tightly. You saved us, all of us, one whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The firefighters and emergency crew were already swarming the runway, rushing to help, but the passengers barely noticed. They were too caught up in the raw, human relief of surviving what had seemed impossible. Maya stepped out of the cockpit, every step feeling heavier than the last, as though gravity itself wanted her to process the enormity of what she had just accomplished. The faces turned toward her, some smiling, some crying, all filled with awe. Cameras clicked, phones were raised, and she realized that the story of this flight, her story, would be told for years. Yet, in that moment, It wasn't fame or recognition that overwhelmed her. It was understanding. Understanding that she had faced unimaginable fear and, against all odds, had prevailed. She had transformed the training she had once thought of as abstract into real, life-saving action. 300 lives and their families. Their futures had been preserved because she had dared to act when everyone else had been paralyzed by panic. Maya's knees finally gave way, and she sank to the tarmac, tears streaking her face. She remembered her early days on flight simulators, the countless hours learning every dial, every instrument, every emergency procedure. She remembered doubting herself, thinking she wasn't ready, that she was too young, too inexperienced. Yet, here she was, standing in the middle of what had just become a miracle. From that day on, she wasn't just an aviation student. She was more than her dreams, more than the lessons she had learned in a simulator. She had proven courage, determination, and quick thinking under the most extreme pressure. She had become a hero. And though the story of Flight 7092 would soon spread across the world, the quiet satisfaction in Maya's chest, the knowledge that she had truly saved lives, was rewarded now. She looked up at the sky, the clouds now calm and glowing with the first light of dawn, and whispered to herself, "Sky, made it *, and indeed, she had."